They shall.
We also request that the attorneys and the witnesses have their own copies of the exhibits and that they are not displayed on the screen until after they have been admitted.
They shall.
And finally, Your Honor, we request that if any technical difficulties do arise, that time be stopped.
Absolutely.
And with that, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
All right. I do believe then we are ready to begin with plaintiff's opening statements.
Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury, my name is Faith Windwigler, representing the prosecution in this case, along with my associates. My client, Dakota Weirs, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to the negligence of Lush Fertilizers. Mr. Dakota Weirs' goal is to recover the non-economic damages from the defendant caused by the fertilizer and to bring forth a negligence claim. This is a civil case, and plaintiff Dakota Weirs must prove his case by a preponderance of the evidence. The facts of this case are straightforward. The evidence will go to show that negligence negates safety, that profit was put over people. We will call 3 witnesses: Dakota Weirs, Carson Durst, head of the research and development team at Terrace Greenery, as well as former intern of Lush's current CEO, and Dr. Casey Rogers, a doctor of agriculture and entomology and current professor of horticulture and entomology from the University of California, Berkeley. First, Mr. Weirs will tell us about the constricting bounds of living with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, the horrors caused by a company's inability to protect consumers. Then Mr. Durst will tell us about his experiences with the dismissive, greedy, solely profit-minded Blake Doncourt and the way she runs Lush Fertilizer behind the scene, including the lack of care, attention to detail, and consumer safety precautions taken. Finally, Dr. Rogers will explain the signs of Drufo and the findings of a study he conducted on Drufo's carcinogenic impacts on humans, especially with regard to higher rates of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, the disease Mr. Weirs battles daily. The defense will then also call 3 witnesses: Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush Fertilizers, Skylar Weirs, Dakota's very own twin, and Dr. Devin Williams, the head of the toxicology and research team at Lush. Blake Doncourt will tell you how he puts profits over people by not baking his fertilizer despite recommendations and by not putting a warning of cancer risk on the product. Skylar Weirs will then tell you about his questionable motives for testifying, as his father's money now goes towards Dakota's medical bills, and he has to work 2 full-time jobs due to this reallocation, in addition to his own lack of secondary education. Finally, Dr. Devin Williams will tell you about the tests he expects to show Drufo's safety and environmental benefits. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a cancer that derails the life of its victims. Dakota Weirs' life has been jeopardized due to the actions or inactions made by a greedy company by the name of Lush Fertilizer. By not taking critical precautions against the dangers of the chemical Drufo, they failed to protect Ms. Weirs and failed to uphold the safety of workers. They prioritized profit over people. This case presents pressing issues that must be addressed. For these reasons, after you have heard all the evidence, at the end of this trial, we will ask you to return a verdict in favor of Dakota Weirs. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. And would the defense like to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Not all heroes wear capes. The temperature of the earth is rising. Dead zones in the ocean are growing. Every day, humanity inches closer to destroying the environment. And it's not the problem isn't a couple of missed recycling days. The problem are massive corporations pumping oil into our oceans, chemicals into our rivers. Corporations willing to do whatever it takes to make a profit, including take down their competitors. 20 years ago, Blake Doncourt started an eco-friendly fertilizer company with the environment at the forefront. Over the years, his company grew. People chose Lush over bigger brands, not just because it's a great product, but because, like Lush, consumers want to be part of the solution. Once Lush starts to dominate the market, competitors take aim. Dakota Weirs sees a single negative news report on Lush fertilizer and pulls the trigger. The truth is that Lush fertilizer is the only fertilizer specifically designed to reduce risk to people and to save the environment. The truth is that Lush and its CEO, Blake Doncourt, are the winners of several humanitarian and environmental awards. Members of the jury, my name is Kira Graham, and along with Ashton Vierick and Heidi Haverkamp, I represent Lush Fertilizer. Today, both sides carry the burden of proof. The plaintiff must prove that Lush intended for Dakota Weirs to use this product, that Lush failed to prevent and in fact caused Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Only if they manage to prove that will we, in return, be obliged to prove comparative fault, meaning Dakota's actions are to blame for her developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Dakota Weirs worked with dozens of fertilizers, not just Lush's, but other fertilizers known for being carcinogenic. He did this while ignoring common sense, safety labels, and all of the persistent orders from his boss to wear protective clothing. Dr. Casey Rogers, their own expert witness, confirms that wearing the protective clothing Dakota refused to would have significantly reduced all carcinogenic risk. Dr. Devin Williams, our expert for this trial, finds that the only study the plaintiff even brings to prove Drufo causes cancer is unreliable and not credible. Carsten Durst works for Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitor and holds a personal animosity for Blake Doncourt. The same Mr. Doncourt who had his own company and the US Environmental Protection Agency cleared Drufo as safe. Skylar Weirs, an agritech expert, confirms this and says that this is nothing but a pseudo-scientific hit job. Throughout today's trial, as the evidence is shown, ask yourself these three questions. Would we be here right now if Dakota Weirs had just worn protection like he was told to? What do Lush's competitors gain from this lawsuit? And finally, where is the definitive link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? At the end of today's trial, Ms. Vierick will answer these three questions for you and ask that you find Lush Fertilizer not liable. Lush Fertilizer is not responsible for Dakota Weirs' non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And to this day, they are the only fertilizer company specifically dedicated to a greener tomorrow. Not all heroes wear capes. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. I think we are ready to go ahead and move to the plaintiff's case in chief. If the plaintiffs want to call their first witness.
The prosecution now calls Dakota Weirs to the stand.
And you can go ahead with your examination.
Sorry, my volume was off. That is my bad. Okay, let's talk about you for a second. Sorry, yeah. Can you state your name and spell your last for the record?
Of course. My name is Dakota Weirs, W-E-I-R-S.
And how old are you?
I'm 20 years old.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a student who has always worked extremely hard in everything I do. I put in the work to excel with grades, was president of the student government, and involved in NHS. I volunteer at the homeless shelter by washing dishes, serving meals, and just helping the less fortunate. But now I can barely even help myself around my own house. I always used to play the piano, very competitively and was going to go to college for it, but now I can't.
And why is that?
Well, ever since I was little, I absolutely loved the piano. I remember before I even really understood what it was, I used to build forts and play with my toys underneath it. Then as I grew, I would constantly play with the foot pedals until I could finally reach the keys. I would just bang them all day. I even started playing little ditties I made up, and my grandfather used to play for me as well. He used to let me sit on his lap while he played and show me how the pedals worked. He sadly passed away when I was 7 years old, and ever since then, just being on the piano would make me feel as if he was right there with me.
So you've been playing piano ever since you could basically walk.
Honestly, since I could crawl, I just absolutely love it and have felt an extreme connection with it since day one. My parents had made me start lessons after my grandfather passed. They knew how close we were, so they thought it would help. I mean, they were definitely right. Ever since then, I studied music theory in my pastime, and I would play whenever I could, find the time between my extracurriculars and clubs. I even drew a mini keyboard in my notebook so I could practice on the bus or long drives.
And then what opportunities have come from you playing the piano?
Many. Some awards and recitals, and people would come from all over to hear me play. Juilliard offered me a full ride scholarship, which I had to turn down. I can't even play anymore. The bench causes me bruises. My fatigue makes it so even the shortest concerto is impossible to play. Piano was my life. Yet the worst part about it is that when my grandfather died, I connected with him through the piano. I feel like I lost him all over again in my inability to play.
And what do you think caused the sickness that has brought you so much loss?
Lush fertilizer. They're the ones that not only made me lose my life and my future, but also made me lose my grandfather twice. I have proof too. When I was 14, I started working at Haven Landscaping. I wasn't old enough to handle all the big machinery, so my main job was to be seeding and of course, fertilizing. I loved being outdoors and to use my hands, so I thought it'd be a perfect fit for me.
I'm sorry, counsel, if you could just repeat your objection.
Objection narrative.
I'm gonna go ahead and sustain that.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about your job?
Well, yes, I was seeded and I did some fertilizing because I was not old enough to do the machinery. So I was outdoors and I used my hands a lot.
And then why do you think this job caused your illness?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a genetic disease. It is not a genetic disease. It is purely caused by your environment. I have a twin who participated in almost the same exact activities as I, all except for my job and exposure to Drufo. So if I got it, then she would have it too. But she didn't, and basically the only thing that differed in our environments was Lush fertilizer.
You mentioned your twin. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
My twin is a freelance writer, always writing for the right price. They're in major debt from gambling, and I think the only reason that she's going against her own family is because she got hostile towards us after my parents had to pay so much for my medical bills. They need the money and will write anything for some. I still love them to death, but please, they are on my side because it's right. They only want to get back at me and my parents.
Then let's return to Lush. What led you to this connection between your illness and Lush fertilizer?
During my many bouts of depression, since my life has ended, I was watching the news and I saw a story come up about Drufo and its connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and how Lush fertilizer included it. Like I said, I worked with the fertilizer for Haven, and I know I had been using Lush fertilizer. I also called my boss and warned him about the fertilizer, and he sent me a picture of the label. Wouldn't you know, Drufo. I also noticed that there were zero warnings on the label. Other fertilizers had warnings such as don't use indoors, but Lush, none. I know for a fact that I used Lush indoors and as I was instructed to do so, and why shouldn't I have? It doesn't say not to.
And then you mentioned Drufo. Can you explain this a little bit more?
Yes. My dad, who speaks fluent French, and I started researching into Drufo with Lush fertilizer and found out that Drufo is banned all over the world, including France. When he read the French label, it was exactly the same, except for one big thing. Take a guess. No Drufo. I know that Lush fertilizer knew it because it caused health issues, and they didn't do anything about it, at least not here. In other places, maybe, but not here. Nothing. They did nothing, and my life is over because of it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Weirs. My name is Ashlyn Bierick.
Good evening.
Let's start by talking about your recent diagnosis. You were diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma,
That is correct.
and you believe that Lush fertilizer is the sole cause of your disease.
I do. They had Drufo in their product.
And this all started one day when you saw a news story.
Yes, I saw a news story that displayed that they had leaked evidence, leaked documents of Drufo in their things, and they knew about it. And I also took into
Mr.
consideration,
Weirs.
yeah,
And like you mentioned, this news story exposed Drufo using claims saying that it was dangerous.
yes, the news story showed that there were leaked documents that Lush Fertilizer knew about the Drufo in their products.
And Mr. Weirs, this was a single news story.
Sure, I mean, there's, yeah.
But after this story, you locked in on Lush fertilizer being the cause of your disease.
Yes, I took in the many factors that were in my environment and did research behind that one case.
Speaking of research, you didn't research any of the other fertilizers or lawn chemicals you were exposed to, did you?
No, I did. I even mentioned in my statement that I looked at other warnings of other fertilizers.
But after this news story, you only researched Lush fertilizer. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, it was most relevant. It had Drufo in it.
Now, your research led you to looking into the use of Drufo in other countries.
Sure, correct.
And eventually you learned that it wasn't used in France.
Yeah, I just questioned why is that?
But you don't know why it's banned, do you?
I do not know why it's banned in everywhere except the US. It's correct.
And you don't know if it's at all related to Drufo being a carcinogen, do you?
I mean, I could only assume it's the only thing that's
Proper
not
lay
in there.
opinion.
I'm sorry, counsel, can you repeat your objection?
Improper lay opinion.
Response, Your Honor?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, this question doesn't need any specialized education or knowledge in order to answer it. And if the witness doesn't know, he can simply say that.
I agree. I'm going to overrule the objection.
I'll ask again, Mr. Weirs. You don't know if it was banned because Drufo is a carcinogen, do you?
I don't know. All I know is it's banned in everywhere except the US, the European Union specifically.
Now let's talk about your different exposures while at Havens Landscaping. You worked at Havens Landscaping for 4 years.
That's correct.
And during this time, you worked as a landscaping technician.
Yep, I did seeding and fertilizing as I mentioned in my statement or in my
Yes.
direct.
And like you mentioned, you weren't able to handle the heavy machinery.
Yep, wasn't old enough.
So instead, you handled several different fertilizers.
Yep, that's what my boss told me to do.
You also handled several different lawn chemicals.
Can you repeat the question?
You also handled several different lawn chemicals.
That's correct.
And all of these different chemicals came along with their own risks.
Yes, but I did use Lush fertilizer longest for about 3 to 4 years.
Yes, but you also used several different fertilizers for several of those years.
Correct. I was given others.
Yes, and like you said, those others had their own risks.
Yeah, they had warnings preventing the causes of things that could happen.
But like you mentioned earlier, you didn't do any research on these other fertilizers after you locked in on Lush fertilizer.
No, the news.
Question asked and answered.
Response.
Oh, sorry.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Please.
Your Honor, I am raising a slightly different question that related to my most recent chapter in my cross examination.
And any response from the plaintiffs?
Yes, Your Honor. It is almost worded identically to the question that she had asked before, and it is getting at the exact same point.
What question was that?
If he has done research into other fertilizers.
I'll allow the defense to rephrase their question.
We'll move on. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about your disregard for safety protocols. Now, during your 4 years at Havens, your boss always told you to wear protective gear.
Yes, but I followed the status quo of the other employees with me that were actually on the field who did not wear it
Mr.
as they were
Weers.
working.
I know you'd like to explain, but you'll have plenty of time for that on
Objection.
redirect.
The opposing counsel isn't letting my witness finish his statement.
Response, Your Honor?
Sure.
If I was allowed to finish, I was going to restate my question and ensure that he would actually answer the question and not give an explanation that didn't apply to the question itself.
I will just remind the parties to not talk over each other. It is a little more difficult with Zoom, but I am going to overrule the objection and allow this line of questioning to continue.
Now, I'll ask again. Your boss always told you to wear protective gear while handling chemicals.
Yes, but he was never out there with us. He didn't know how hot it was.
And this protective gear entailed long sleeves
Correct.
and long pants
Correct.
and gloves
Yep.
and a face mask.
An N95. Yep.
But you rarely followed any of these guidelines.
Again, I followed the status quo. I was one of the youngest people out there. I was doing what everyone else was. No one else was doing it, and I was just hot.
Mr. Weers, so that's a yes. You rarely followed these guidelines.
Sure.
Mr. Weers? Okay. You don't like following the rules, do you, Mr. Weers?
Never said that.
But like you said, you didn't follow the direct orders given by your boss.
Again, my boss wasn't out there with us. I was just doing what everyone else was. I was one of the youngest. Just want to fit in.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Weers, when you were out working for Haven Landscaping, how many people would you say were wearing the protective covering that was recommended?
No, pretty much everyone was doing as I was. I was just following the others.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused? Assuming that is a yes, and if the plaintiffs would like to call their second witness.
Good afternoon. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Carson Durst to the stand. May you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Carson Durst, D-U-R-S-T.
Where are you currently employed?
Harris Greenery.
What is your relationship to the Doncourts?
20 years ago, Blake and the whole Doncourt family were like family to me. I was best friends with Charles Doncourt. We played soccer together on the local traveling team, and we were inseparable. There were Sunday night dinners at the Doncourts and summer trips to the lake house. The Doncourts were my ride to every soccer game.
What are your credentials?
I'm the head of the research and development team at Terrace Greenery, overseeing Terrace Greenery's development line of its fertilizers and lawn enhancement products. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Arizona State University.
What was your position at Lush Fertilizer?
After 3 months at Lush Fertilizer, I was promoted to a full-time position as a product development engineer.
Let's talk a little bit about Drufo. Was the Drufo product ever tested to see if it can cause cancer in animals?
As part of my research on the particular chemical compound in Drufo that I was studying, I found one study from England which concluded that the particular chemical compound.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response?
It's not really hearsay. I'm just asking about the steps that were taken in the process.
Your Honor, may I reply?
Sure.
Ms. Sturz was about to go into the conclusions of the study and the findings they got. This under 803 would be an out-of-court statement.
And I'll allow the plaintiffs to.
I mean, the study is important to the case. It's a big factor in the case, and it's a big factor in what the company did in general. It's the deciding factor in everything.
So I believe that you're talking more about relevance, but I'll allow you to lay a little bit more foundation as hearsay, if you could ask a couple more questions.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the study and just what it contained?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay again. To go into what that study contained is to go into the statements of that document, which are out of court.
And again, I'll just let the plaintiffs lay a little bit more foundation.
Can you just elaborate on what your company did with the study?
Yes. So the first study was found in England, and we didn't really know whether or not it was dangerous in humans, but we did find it was carcinogenic in rats. And so that was what we first found out.
Okay. When did you document this study?
I documented this study on June 10th, 2003.
And what happened the following September?
Right on the heels of my promotion to product development engineer, we got word on high that Lush Fertilizer was doing another in-house study, this time relating specifically to whether Drufo was potentially carcinogenic in humans.
Permission to share my screen with a copy of Exhibit 3.
As long as you show it.
We have set in the preliminary matters that we requested that the witnesses first view it on their own before it is shared on the screen to reduce the jury seeing it before it's entered.
And that's on me. I was a little confused. Counsel, are you going to share it with your witness, or are you attempting to publish this at this point? And by publish, I mean share it with everybody.
Publish.
So I'm not going to allow that, but I will allow you to show your witness specifically what exhibit you're referring to.
Okay. All right. So should I just continue with questioning and just skip to the exhibit?
I believe that your witness can testify if she has the particular exhibit in front of her. She can say that she does, and you can continue your questioning.
She does.
Yes, I know which exhibit it is.
Yeah.
Great, then you can continue to lay the foundation to enter this as an exhibit.
Okay. So, without getting into its contents, can you identify this?
Yes.
Okay. When did you start working at Lush Fertilizer?
In June 2003, I was originally an intern and moved through the ranks fast.
How would you describe your promotion at Lush Fertilizer?
I earned it fair and square.
Why the defensiveness?
I believe that my promotion was just because of, or some believe that my promotion was just because of my relationship with the Don courts, but I assure you that the reason I passed up the more experienced engineers was because I was performing at a higher level.
What was your task during the DRUFO research?
I was tasked with researching one of the chemical compounds that comprised DRFO.
How would you describe the research process to discover if DRUFO was potentially carcinogenic?
It was influenced by the higher ups for sure.
Why do you say that?
There was certainly pressure from management for the internal studies to be read in a certain way. There was a conclusion management that wanted, and we were encouraged to document the data in a form that supported the hypothesis.
Would you say this is unique to this situation?
I mean, in business, it is commonly understood that studies should be worded to avoid certainties and to give the company wiggle room in case of a lawsuit such as this. So I wouldn't say this pressure was necessarily unique to this situation. However, in December of 2003, we had concluded our analysis and Jerry gathered us all in the conference room to discuss our findings. One scientist expressed concerns that not only may DRFO contain a carcinogen, but that analysis found that it was perhaps linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And what did your superiors do when they heard this news?
They did not take it seriously. At the conclusion of the meeting, Alex Monroe, an upper echelon, who said,
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
Your Honor, she is just reiterating what happened and what was said. This is not hearsay or opinion. This is just what was actually said.
Your Honor, may I respond? Mr. was about to go into what said. That calls for hearsay and would discuss an out-of-court statement.
All right, I will just skip the question. What was the conclusion of the report?
it concluded, on average, our statistics and our distribution is below what is required by the law. The mean data is within 3 standard deviations from the applicable federal standards. Further analysis is required before we are able to make any conclusions regarding the likelihood of the chemical compound issue causing any long-term health effects, including cancer.
Where was non-Hodgkin lymphoma mentioned in this report?
Nowhere specifically.
What measures did Lush Fertilizer take in light of this information?
The report went on to recommend baking Dufro as part of the production process to eliminate the possibility that Dufro could be considered carcinogenic.
And what are your thoughts on the report since you participated in the research?
The study was incredibly misleading.
Misleading how?
It's obvious to me that some data was left out of the report to protect the company.
Why were they also
Your Honor, speculation. Ms. Durst was not a part of these second studies, nor in the office when the executives made this report. She would have no idea what was part of the research or what was in the heads of the executives when they were putting into the report.
As to the mental state of the executives, I will sustain the objection.
Right? Why were they also desperate to protect Drufo?
As far as Lush Fertilizer was concerned, Drufo was the goose that laid the golden egg.
Why is that?
Well, the texture and longevity of the fertilizers produced by Lush Fertilizer were what set it apart from its competitors. Consequently, Drufo was critical to Lush Fertilizer's continued financial success. I have no doubt that they knew that this could be carcinogenic.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. She once again tried to go into the speculation on what the executives knew. Mr. just testified that she knew that the executives knew it was carcinogenic.
Response?
Mr. Analysis of this is not completely unfounded since she was in the room when a scientist did say that this was going to potentially be carcinogenic. And she heard this and was a part of the studies that did determine this.
I'll allow counsel to rephrase their question to fit the offer of proof that counsel just made.
Could I just continue, Your Honor?
Absolutely.
Okay. What was this time for you like at Lush Fertilizer?
During this time, There's a lot of pushback of the senior members, my role and the choice in assignments. My annual performance reviews suddenly started to reflect those sentiments, and the quality of my work was criticized. I was accused of just skating along and not pulling my weight. Some went so far as to say I thought I was untouchable because of my relationship with Charlie and the Doncourts.
How would you respond to these claims?
I worked hard. They were unwarranted. I do not have a vendetta against this company. The only problem I have with Lush Fertilizer is that they prioritize profit over their customer safety and our safety.
How did your time at Lush Fertilizer come to an end?
Well, the executive team at Lush Fertilizer confronted me about the mounting complaints about my job performance from my coworkers and staff. They made me sign a performance improvement plan, which meant I was on a prohibitory status with the company. I became marginalized at work and relegated to the assignments no one wanted.
What did Blake Doncourt, the man who was practically a second father to you, do when you brought forth these complaints?
Blake refused to intervene, telling me I was even lucky to have a job. He reminded me of how many Ivy League graduates he overlooked for me.
How would you describe this reaction to you?
Unexpected.
What was Blake's life like during this time?
He was going through a messy divorce, and so I resolved to bring up.
Your Honor, relevance?
There is relevance, Your Honor, to Blake's financial situation and his position as CEO of a company.
I'll overrule the objection.
Continue, Carsonders.
So I resolved to bring it up to him later once his personal life and temper had stabilized.
When did you do this?
A few months later, after another abysmal performance review in early 2005, when it was clear to me that I had no future with Lush Fertilizer. I went up to his office and spoke with the administrative assistant, who told me Blake was livid because Morgan got the lake house, and a judge was also ordering Blake to pay Morgan a ridiculous amount in alimony. She said that the budget was going to be tight moving forward.
What was Blake's financial situation like during this time?
It wasn't great.
And what did you hear Blake say through the door to his office?
I heard him say, "I don't care, just do it. Do what you need to make it happen."
What did you go there to talk to Blake about?
Product manager and my direct supervisor at the time, Jerry Langley, had it out for me. I told him how she had told me that I hadn't turned things around, and I honestly didn't think she was being fair.
When did your time at Lush Fertilizer come to an end?
Well, in December of 2006, but at that point I had already been hired by Terrace.
What happened then?
A legal battle ensued. Lush tried to get a court order enjoining me from working at Terrace because they feared even disclosures of trade secrets given the overlap products produced by both companies.
What did you sign when you first started at Lush Fertilizer?
A confidentiality agreement. Though I did not remember it at the time, I do know that the confidentiality agreement stated I could not disclose Lush Fertilizer's trade secrets.
And what happened ultimately?
A settlement was reached where Tara and I agreed that I would not start my employment there for a period of 6 months.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Nomination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Durst. My name is Kira Graham.
Good evening.
Now, right before graduating college, you still had not found a job, correct?
Correct.
And you commiserated about this with your friend, Charlie Doncourt.
Correct.
And Charlie Doncourt told you that Lush Fertilizer was hiring interns over the summer.
That is correct.
Now, Charlie's father, Blake Doncourt, runs Lush Fertilizer.
Can you repeat that question?
Now, Charlie Doncourt's father, Blake Doncourt, runs Lush Fertilizer.
That is correct.
And the Doncourts were like the family you never had, correct?
That is correct.
So Charlie was sure that his father could pull some strings for you.
That is correct.
And when you applied to Lush Fertilizer, you were hired.
Yes, that is correct.
You were even promoted after only 3 months of working there.
Yes, that is correct. To product development engineer.
And it was your understanding that there were rumors around the office that the only reason you got that job was because of your relationship with the Doncourts.
Yes, that is correct, but I feel that I worked hard for that spot, and I feel like they were unwarranted.
You were even chosen over more experienced and qualified engineers.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Let's talk about your time at Lush Fertilizer. You specifically were in charge of researching a compound called C3NO9P.
Yes.
And you found along the way that this compound specifically could be beneficial to the environment.
That was not in my statement.
I'm sorry, is that a yes or a no?
That is a no.
Ms. Durst, you researched studies for this compound.
I researched just like Durfro and how it could be carcinogenic in rats.
Ms. Durst, you specifically researched C3NO9P.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And you found studies while researching.
Yes.
And you read these studies.
Yes.
And in these studies, and in a specific study that you testified to on direct, it discusses how this compound is beneficial to the environment.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Now, you also found multiple studies confirming that this compound was not carcinogenic in rats.
Yes.
You found no studies discussing this compound being carcinogenic in humans.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Let's move on to how you ended your career at Lush. Ms. Durst, after another abysmal performance review in 2005, you went to talk to Blake Doncourt.
Yes, that is correct.
And in these performance reviews, your quality of work was criticized.
Yes, that is correct.
And you specifically went to talk to Blake Doncourt about your boss, Jerry Langley.
Yes.
Blake Doncourt told you to work out whatever problem you were having with her on your own.
Yes, that is correct. He refused to intervene.
His reaction made you confused.
Yeah, I wasn't sure why he said this. I felt like I was pushing and doing my work, and while my boss was giving all of these reviews, I did not feel like they were fair.
His reaction made you disheartened.
Yes, that is correct.
Even seething.
Not specifically at Blake, but just at the workers, not at the company.
Ms. Durst, I did not ask who you were seething at, just if you were seething. Is that a yes, you were seething?
I would not say that. I would say that I was just confused on why he wasn't going to intervene with this problem.
Ms. Durst, is it your testimony today that his reaction did not make you seething?
I would not say that.
Ms. Durst, you made a statement for this case prior to coming here.
Yes.
And in this statement, you say that his reaction made you seething.
Okay.
And so you decided to apply to Terrace Greenery.
Yes, that is correct.
Terrace Greenery is Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitor.
Yes, that is correct.
And you were called here today by the plaintiff to testify.
Yes.
The plaintiff is suing Blake Doncourt's company, Lush Fertilizer. The company you felt marginalized while working at,
Yes, you could say that.
run by the person you felt betrayed you, correct?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused? Seems
Your
like
Honor. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Dr. Casey Rogers, Rogers.
What do you do for a living?
I'm currently a professor at the University of California, Berkeley in the Department of Horticulture and Entomology.
What experience do you have in this field?
I have a bachelor's degree of science in agriculture and chemistry from Colorado State University. I've received my PhD from the University of California, Berkeley in architecture and entomology. I've also worked as a research analyst for a multinational company, and I've published numerous scholarly articles on the harmful effect of prolonged exposure to chemicals such as TRUFO.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Let the record reflect that opposing counsel has previously been provided with a copy of Exhibit 6.
it shall reflect.
Your Honor, permission, without going into its contents, Dr. Rogers, could you identify Exhibit 6?
Yes, this is my curriculum vitae.
Is it a true and correct copy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit number 6 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection as to hearsay.
This is not hearsay. This is based purely on his research, his education, and his experience in this field.
Response, Your Honor.
Sure.
This is an out-of-court statement.
Response.
Sure.
Laying grounds to move to enter witness as an expert.
At this point, I'm not going to allow the admission, but I will let counsel ask a few more questions.
Okay. Dr. Rogers, could you please tell us about your employment in the field of horticulture and entomology?
Yes, I'm a respected professor from UC Berkeley, and I actually got my PhD from Berkeley, and I've also got my degree in agriculture and chemistry from Colorado State University.
Could you tell us about your work as a research analyst?
Yes, of course. So I've been a part of multiple projects, and I've identified and verified data, information, and analyzed to help support problem solving in these research analysts.
Could you also tell us about some of your current projects on the field of horticulture and entomology?
So, like I said, I did do studies on TRUFO and the harmful effects of TRUFO. I've also conducted surveys which reveals frequency of multiple resistance to TRUFO. I've done herbicide absorption studies, TRUFO resistant weed studies. I've done studies on human exposure to TRUFO.
And all of these are detailed in your curriculum vitae.
Yes, and in my research publications.
Your Honor, the prosecution would now like to offer Exhibit number 6 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection as to hearsay. This is still an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
Response.
Sure.
We have just laid the grounds as to why this is relevant to this case based on facts that are contained in this exhibit.
I'm going to allow the admission of Exhibit 6.
Your Honor, permission to share the screen so the witness may view a copy of Exhibit 6.
Granted.
As we have before said, the witness can identify this. Is this true, Dr. Casey Rogers?
Yes, this is a true and correct copy.
Thank you. The prosecution would now like to publish Exhibit 6 into evidence.
Permission granted.
Permission to stop sharing screen. Your Honor, at this point, based on Dr. Casey Rogers' extensive experience and education, the prosecution would like to offer up Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in the field of agriculture, chemistry, and entomology.
Objection or voir dire.
Voir dire, and no objection. The defense does not object to Dr. Casey Rogers being tenured in these fields.
And just to be clear, agriculture, entomology, and what was the other one?
Chemistry.
Thank you. Dr. Casey Rogers will be tendered as an expert in agriculture, entomology, and chemistry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Moving on, Doctor, how are you connected to this case?
In short, I conducted a study on the possible health effects of long-term exposure to DRUFO.
And could you clarify what exactly is DRUFO?
Lustrous Fertilizers Research and Development Team patented this chemical and it became a bonding agent for all of Lustrous products.
Could you briefly explain what led you to conduct a study on the effects of DRUFO?
In short, when DRUFO first came on the market after its development in about 2003, I noticed that its arrival was rushed and lacked sufficient testing. So driven by these concerns, I constructed a study on the adverse effects of long-term exposure to DRUFO specifically. And
how did you conduct this study?
In theory, I monitor a control group of people who have never been exposed to DRUFO. A group of people who use DRUFO-containing products on occasion, and a group of people who were exposed daily to DRUFO over a period of years following their exposure. The health conditions of the group exposed to DRUFO were compared to the control group, specifically with regard to the frequency of which people of each contracted non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Dr. Rogers, could you summarize briefly what is non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Yes, briefly, non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a specific type of cancer which affects white blood cells, which are called lymphocytes.
And what did you find through your study?
So among those exposed to DRUFO compared to my control group, there was an increase in serious health conditions and diagnoses, specifically cancer and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So the group with prolonged exposure was 10 times more likely to be diagnosed with cancer than those with none, and 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with cancer than those of occasional exposure.
What are the implications of these findings?
Long-term exposure to DRUFO has cancerous impacts. In addition, 28% of the people who are diagnosed with this illness do not survive. And the use of DRUFO has contributed to that percentage of people.
What did you determine as the cause of Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Objection, Your Honor. This is out of the scope of the witness's expertise, as he has not been tenured in any sort of medical field, simply in horticulture, entomology, and agriculture.
Response, Your Honor?
Yeah.
The fields of agriculture and entomology are highly related to this case, and the way that Dakota Weir's was affected, he is not speaking specifically on her medical condition, but he is speaking on the causes which are related to agriculture and entomology.
Response, Your Honor?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The question directly implies an answer that would regard to a field of knowledge that would require specialization, particularly in the medical field.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
So again, Dr. Rogers, what did you determine as the cause of Dakota Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Like I was saying, there is high medical probability that Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by prolonged exposure to DRUFO.
How did you reach this conclusion?
In the course of my examination, I reviewed Dakota Weir's medical and employment records.
What did you find through the examination of Weir's employment records?
Through Weir's employment records, I have found that he has worked for a landscaping company, and because of this, he has worked with DRUFO and has been in frequent contact with the chemical for about 4 years.
What did you find through the examination of Weir's medical records?
Through his medical records, I found that Weirs has worked with a product containing Drufo for a prolonged period of time. Weirs' level of exposure was similar in nature to those in the study who had prolonged exposure to the chemical. Weirs' medical records show that he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma as well.
Could you explain briefly the science behind non-Hodgkin lymphoma and exposure to Drufo?
So in short, lymph-containing cells and foreign particles.
Objection, Your Honor. This is not within the scope of the witness's testimony, as once again, this is asking for a medical sense of knowledge that Dr. Rogers has not been tendered in.
Response. As I have testified earlier, he has expertise in the field of agriculture and etymology, and we are speaking about the relationship between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He is speaking more on the Drufo side as this is in the field of his expertise.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
As I was saying, Dr. Rogers, could you explain the science between the relationship between non-Hodgkin lymphoma and exposure to Drufo?
Yes, so well, in short, lymph-containing cells and foreign particles from Drufo enter the tissue and diffuse through and into the space between Weirs' skin and lung tissue. As these particles accumulate in lymph nodes, their concentration overwhelms the immune function of lymphocyte cells, resulting in many cancerous masses.
How did these findings inform your conclusion?
So through a view of his medical records and employment records, I concluded that non-Hodgkin lymphoma was caused by prolonged exposure to Drufo.
And Dr. Rogers, why did you want to testify today?
My findings prove that prolonged exposure to Drufo, a recurrent situation and not exclusive to Weirs, leads to the development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I'm hoping this case will open doors to class action lawsuits and that will take action against inhumane preventable causes such as this disease.
And do you have financial incentive?
Well, truthfully, yes. As I said before, I am hoping this case will lead to a class action lawsuit against dangerous chemicals such as Drufo. However, I have devoted my entire education and career to the field of agriculture and entomology. Therefore, I am extremely passionate about advocacy in these fields. Additionally, nothing in my statement has been biased in any way whatsoever, as I have testified on the basis of facts and scientific findings.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Casey Rogers. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Dr. Rogers. My name is Heidi Haberkamp.
Good evening.
Let's talk about your study. You conducted a study pertinent to this case.
Yes, that is correct.
And this study examined 3 groups. The first having no exposure to Drufo.
Yes.
The second having occasional exposure to Drufo.
Yes.
And the third having prolonged exposure to Drufo.
Yes, this is correct.
So Dr. Rogers, throughout your study, the only chemical that you controlled for was Drufo.
Yes, that is correct.
Let's talk about your experience as an expert witness. This is your first time testifying as an expert?
Yes, this is true.
And you have been retained to testify for the plaintiff in this matter?
Yes, this is true.
And you hope that this won't be your last time giving testimony?
Yes, like I stated in my direct, I hope that this will lead to class action lawsuits and will actually take accountability on these harmful diseases and effects.
So that's a yes, Dr. Rogers.
Yes.
And you want to be on the forefront of this battle?
Yes.
Let's talk about the second part of your study. You examined ways to best mitigate and prevent exposure.
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Your study focused on ways to prevent and mitigate exposure.
Of Drufo, yes.
And in this study, you found that fertilizers or pesticides could be absorbed through contact with the skin.
Yeah, so basically lymph-containing cells and foreign particles from Drufo can enter the tissue and diffuse through the space between skin and lung tissues.
So that's a yes?
Yes.
And you also found that it could be inhaled while in the aerosolized version?
Yes, this is correct.
And although your study was inconclusive, you made recommendations.
Yes, I have.
And these recommendations include wearing a mask while working with the product
Yes.
and utilizing protective clothing while working with the product.
Yes, this is correct.
Dr. Rogers, you are aware that these exact recommendations are listed on the back of all of Lush Fertilizer's products?
Yes, but this is a very dangerous chemical. Drufo can cause cancer, and like I stated before.
Dr. Rogers, that was not my question. I asked whether or not you knew that this is already on the back of all of Lush Fertilizer's labels, and your answer is yes, correct?
Yes.
No further questions at this time.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused. I think you were muted, but I saw the nod.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do the plaintiffs have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
Does the defense have any witnesses they'd like to put on?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we call Blake Doncourt to the stand. May I proceed? Good evening, Mr. Doncourt. My name is Ashlyn Bierek. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good evening. My name is Blake Doncourt. That's spelled Doncourt.
What's your involvement in today's trial?
Well, I'm the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, and I represent the company in today's trial.
And what is Lush Fertilizer?
Lush Fertilizer is a relatively new fertilizer product on the market that utilizes the bonding agent Drufo to make it overall a much safer, more environmentally friendly, and more effective product than any competing product on the market.
What has your involvement in the company been?
Well, I started just a bit over 2 decades ago, and we started as a very small company, not a big name in the industry whatsoever, and through a lot of hard work, we've built it up into a leading name in the agriculture industry.
What sort of responsibilities come along with your job?
Well, my responsibilities are really just to oversee everything that goes on within the company. So I oversee operations, marketing, research and development, and of course, safety. I also oversee our charitable wing.
Please tell us a bit more about that charity wing.
Well, we donate 10% of all profits to charity efforts every year, and we have our own charity.
Objection, relevance.
Response, Your Honor?
I'm going to have the parties go back because there was quite a bit of an echo, so I'm not aware of what the objection was.
I said relevance, Your Honor.
Okay, and response.
Your Honor, this is extremely relevant. If my witness is allowed to testify, he will go over the different charity portions of the different charity work that comes along with his job. And of course, this relates back to the ultimate matter of whether Lush Fertilizer is liable or not. When the attorney who gave opening statement came up, she talked about how conceited and basically what a terrible person Mr. Doncourt is. It is within our right to defend his reputation in today's trial.
I'll overrule the objection, or it sounds like counsel wants to respond.
It's fine. Overruled is fine.
Okay, continue.
I'll ask again, Mr. Doncourt. Can you tell us a bit more about that charity work?
Yes, we donate 10% of all of our profits to charity every year. We have our own charity that is specifically geared towards cleaning up the oceans of some of the pollution that's in there. And we also donate to a couple of charities that work to reduce the nitrate level in soil and water, because fertilizer has a tendency to release excess nitrates into the soil and water. And we really just want to offset any sort of footprint we might leave on Earth.
Switching gears a bit, let's talk about the fertilizer itself. What is Lush Fertilizer?
So Lush Fertilizer uses a bonding agent Drufo to better bond the nitrogen to some of the other chemicals within the product, which reduces the release of excess nitrogen, which overall makes it much safer, more effective, and more environmentally friendly than anything else out on the market.
Who uses this product?
This product is used by farmers, landscaping companies, as well as home gardeners, but it's specifically geared towards adults and not children.
Are there any dangers associated with this product?
Well, any chemical product is going to come with a few minor dangers. Drufo and Lush do not have any major dangers associated with them. The only minor dangers would be a risk of skin irritation, eye irritation, and respiratory irritation.
Does your company have anything in order to help mitigate these risks?
Yes, we were actually not required to put any sort of warning label or recommendations on our product, but we decided to do so anyways to cover all of our bases. We recommend that all users wear long sleeve clothing at all times when utilizing the product, as well as wear a N95 face mask and eye protection.
Now let's talk about some of the other people who've appeared in court today. How do you know Carson Durst?
I unfortunately know Carson Durst because Carson Durst used to work at Lush Fertilizer.
What was his job at the company?
His job at the company was to work in our research and development department and specifically research the possible side effects that Lush Fertilizer may have.
What were his findings?
The study that Mr. Durst conducted, as well as all subsequent studies, concluded that there was no link between Drufo or Lush and any sort of major health condition.
Does she still stand by these findings?
Carson Durst does not stand by these findings anymore, no.
Objection leading. That was a leading question.
Your Honor, I don't believe that was a leading question.
The question you asked whether or not he stood by it anymore, and that implies an answer of no, he does not stand by it anymore, which leads to the question.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
I'll ask that again. Does Carson Durst still stand by her previous findings?
No.
Does she still work at the company?
Thankfully for Lush Fertilizer, Carson Durst no longer works at our company.
Where does she work now?
She now works for Terra's Greenery.
Was there any correlation between the time when she retracted her support of her previous findings and when she moved to Terra's Greenery?
As you might expect, she retracted her support for the findings of her studies very shortly after leaving the company.
Now, Mr. Doncourt, what do you have to say overall about the claims Carson Durst is making today?
We really need to focus on the studies that Carson Durst conducted. They show that there is no link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that's really all you need to know.
Now, do you know of anyone else making claims that Drufo is dangerous?
The main other person would be Casey Rogers.
What claims has he made?
Casey Rogers claims to have conducted a study that has found a link between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
When did you first hear about this study?
Strangely, I really only first heard about this study in the litigation of this trial.
Were you able to look at it at all?
I did eventually get to look at it.
Did you have any concerns that came from looking at this?
Well, of course, I'm not a scientist, so I can't speak to some of those more scientific aspects, although I know my friend Dr. Williams has a lot of problems with the science within the study. What I can say is that the study was never peer-reviewed, which is a pretty common practice within these studies. And that basically means that an independent board of scientists did not get to look over this study. And we really just have to trust Casey Rogers and trust Casey Rogers' word for everything that's within that study.
Finally, Mr. Doncourt, would you ever authorize the release of a product to the public that you knew could cause cancer or any other life-threatening diseases?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Look, when I started this company, safety was really number one in terms of my priorities. I want to make products that help the world and help people, and creating a carcinogenic product would not be doing that. And I get it. I'm a CEO, and you might not trust me when I say that, but trust me when I say this. Creating a dangerous carcinogenic product is not good for profits. Our company would fail if we had done that.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Okay, let's talk about you for a second, Mr. Doncourt.
Okay.
You're divorced.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
You're divorced, correct?
Well, that's a little personal, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but here, I'll rephrase it. You have to pay your ex-wife money.
I do pay alimony to my ex-wife, yes.
Correct. And this is because a judge forces you to do this?
Well, the judge doesn't hold me down and take money out of my pockets, but yes, I've been ordered by the court. I don't have a problem with it.
But by law, you were ordered to do this.
Yes.
Okay. And you think this was a stupid judge that ordered you to do this?
I was heated when I first was ordered to do that, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal.
In your statement, you said that you thought it was a stupid judge. Is that correct?
I did in the moment think the judge was stupid, but I really don't have any problem with it.
Okay. But you did all of the work.
I'm sorry, could you clarify what you mean by that?
When it came to money, you did all of the work.
Well, I was the main breadwinner within the family, yes.
And you said your wife just spent your money, just spending and spending.
Yes.
And now you have to pay her so much money.
I have to pay her a reasonable amount of money, yes. That's how alimony works, and that's what the court ordered.
But in your statement, you thought it was so, and I quote, so much money.
Yes.
Okay. You also don't bake your fertilizer.
There's no need to bake the fertilizer because there's no risk of carcinogenicity.
And you say there's no risk. In your statement, you said an insignificant amount of risk. Is that the same as no risk?
Look, anything in the world, any product comes with some risk of carcinogenicity. I mean, the clothes you're wearing come with some risk of carcinogenicity, but the risk within Drufo and Lush is not elevated above that of anything else that you would find in your daily life.
Okay. But baking your fertilizer would reduce this risk even more.
Baking the fertilizer would slightly lower the risk.
So it would reduce the risk. That's a yes.
A little bit, yes.
But you don't bake your fertilizer because it's, and I quote, too costly.
Well, there just isn't really any need to because the fertilizer is safe.
Okay. You also said you didn't bake your fertilizer because you needed the money.
No, not quite. I said that it was costly, but I didn't really need the money.
In your statement, you said you needed the money to keep the vulture capitalists away. Is that correct?
We did end up using that money to pay the vulture capitalists back, yes.
And so what is a vulture capitalist?
A vulture capitalist, that's not in my statement. I can explain if you'd like me to.
Yes, please go ahead.
A vulture capitalist is somebody who gives out loans to companies when they're just beginning and then demands high rates of interest back later on.
So if you hadn't have paid back these loans, your business would not have gone anywhere, correct?
No, that's not true.
But they would have charged such a high interest rate, it would have been hard to make money.
No, that's not true.
Was that not just your definition of a vulture capitalist?
Look, because of how innovative Lush fertilizer is, we make plenty of money to cover all of our bases. So no, it's not true that we would absolutely need to not bake it to pay back the money.
Okay, I'll keep moving on. You make plenty of money. You just said so yourself, and you make plenty to take care of yourself.
That's subjective, but I would say I make enough. Yes.
I mean, in your statement, you said you made plenty to take care of yourself.
Yes.
Okay. And then you were not aware of any studies that were done on Drufo, correct?
Our company conducted many studies on Drufo. So no, I am aware of many studies conducted about Drufo.
Sorry, I meant any studies on Drufo that claimed that they were dangerous.
Well, there are some fake studies that claim it's dangerous, but there's no studies with any science to back them up.
And all of these studies that claim they weren't dangerous were done by your own company, correct?
Yes, well, our company and the EPA also examined it.
Okay. If you had found that Drufo was dangerous, it would hurt your profits, would it not?
Not necessarily. If we found Drufo was dangerous, we wouldn't have released the product to the market, and we would still be making a profit off of our other products.
Okay, but you wouldn't be making as much profit because you wouldn't be able to be selling products with Drufo included.
With how safe and effective and environmentally friendly Drufo is, it has become our main product, and it has done wonders for our profits. But I would never have released the product if it was carcinogenic or dangerous.
So once again, if it had been found dangerous, your profits would have been hurt.
To some extent, but we'd still be making a big profit.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
Okay. And your company did the studies that found Drufo non-dangerous.
As well as the EPA certified that it was not dangerous, and there have been no studies that have found any link between Drufo and any sort of harmful effects.
Except there was a study, correct? You talked about it in your statement.
You mean the study conducted by Casey Rogers?
Yes, you called it fake, but there was a study, correct?
That study doesn't use reliable methods, and we really can't trust it. So that's why I say there are no studies that made that connection, because the science just isn't there.
Yeah, no further questions, Your Honor.
Can you redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Doncourt, why did you choose to not bake your fertilizer?
Well, comparing it to other fertilizer products, Lush is much safer than anything else out on the market. And by including Drufo in the product, we made it an incredibly safe product. The risk of carcinogenicity was extremely low, not elevated above that of any other thing that you would come in contact with in your normal life. So there simply was no need to bake the product.
And was this decision at all related to your divorce or the alimony you were paying?
The decision to not bake the product, it was not at all related to the divorce, and actually came before the alimony. So there's no relation, no.
Finally, Mr. Doncourt, what would you have done if your studies had found that Drufo was attached to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
If the studies conducted by my company, by the EPA, or by any outside source with reliable scientific methods had found any sort of link between Drufo and any serious health condition, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, we would have never released the product to the market.
Thank you, Mr. Doncourt. No further questions, Your Honor.
And may this witness be excused. Okay. Does the defense have any other witnesses they'd like to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Skylar Weirs to stand. Good evening, Ms. Weirs. My name is Kier Graham.
Good evening.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Skylar Weirs. That's Weirs.
Miss Weirs, what do you do for a living?
I'm an investigative journalist. I work for the Rationalist magazine.
And how does what you do for work relate to today's case?
I actually recently authored a series relating the conflict and issues between individual health and corporate policy. And part of that series was on Drufo.
How did you research for these articles that you did?
Gosh, I spent a considerable amount of time, about a year, just looking into different research publications, the references used in those research publications, as well as looking at a wealth of information maintained by the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
And Ms. Weirs, would you consider Drufo and its effects on people and the environment part of agritech and therefore what you studied?
Absolutely, it's a part of agritech.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense requests that the court recognize Skylar Weirs as an expert in the field of agritech, as we have proven that she has spent considerable time researching publications from agritech companies, the references in those publications, along with a wealth of information from the USDA and NASDA, as what was required from your pretrial order.
Any objection or voir dire?
Objection, voir dire.
So there's a pretty significant echo. I believe that council
Moment, Your Honor.
are objecting and they would like to.
Objection, voir dire.
Okay.
Skylar Weirs has no formal education to back up his claims and has no scientific background. He just writes for a speculation magazine.
Objection, Your Honor. Foundation. There has been.
I'm gonna stop you right there just for a second so I can respond to Ms. Weiss. Would counsel like to ask any questions of this expert regarding the basis for their offered expert testimony?
Skylar Weirs is yes. Yes. Do you have a formal education?
Formally, no, but I have definitely been educated by the research articles that I reviewed.
Do you have a scientific background that lets you stand with the other expert witnesses today?
I spent a considerable amount of time looking at all of these research publications, as well as the references from these research publications. So yes, I would say so.
Can't anyone look at these research articles and just say that they deserve to be an expert witness then?
Ms. Weiss, I spent a considerable amount of time looking into all of these things, as well as going into an incredible amount of detail in learning about the subject matter in these articles. So no, the specialized knowledge and skill I have is not common.
One moment, please. One moment to confirm with co-counsel.
That's fine.
Your Honor, the rest of my counsel and I don't believe this witness should be offered as an expert witness, especially considering the fact that there is a lack of scientific background and formal education, and also with 2 jobs taking up Ms. Weirs's time, there is no way that they have enough time to
to put in as much effort as the other expert witnesses do.
Response.
Your Honor, you already ruled on this objection in your pretrial order and set the requirements needed to prove specialized knowledge. As we have met those requirements, and as effort and time are also not any qualifications under Rule 702, we request that you overrule this objection.
I am going to overrule the objection, and I will allow Ms. Weirs to be tendered as an expert.
Ms. Weirs, what specifically did you study about Drufo?
I was looking for articles that had a link between exposure to Drufo and the development of cancer.
And did you find any link between Drufo and cancer?
No, they were either inconclusive at best, or there was no causal link between exposure to Drufo and the development of cancer.
From all your research, were you able to discern why some people believed that there was?
Yes, unfortunately, it's quite common. It's something called a pseudoscientific mass hit job, upon which a rival company is trying to get what is a revolutionary ingredient off the market.
Why would you call Drufo revolutionary?
Simply because the way that it's made, it's safer than almost every commercial pesticide or fertilizer.
How is it safer than other fertilizers?
So the way that Drufo was engineered makes it so that it bonds to the grass to the active ingredients in the pesticides and fertilizers, and it reduces the solubility of nitrogen, and it also just reduces the level of exposure to the actual fertilizer, which would then reduce your amount of exposure to different carcinogens.
Why does it matter if the nitrogen is more soluble or not?
Well, the whole point of a fertilizer is to add nutrients into a crop that is depleted of those. And to make something less soluble, that means that more of that nitrogen is going to be used by the plants instead of ending up in groundwater or downstream in waterways, which would then affect people as well as leading to algal blooms, which then creates dead zones.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. Let's please talk about your relationship to the plaintiff. What is your relation to Dakota Weirs?
It's my twin brother.
If he's your twin brother, why are you testifying against him?
Listen, I love my brother. Of course I do. It's just that it seems to me like in all of his pain and anger at his illness, he's villainized the literal one company that designs its products for this sort of thing not to happen. And I can't let him do that.
Ms. Weirs, did you form any expert opinions in relation to today's trial?
I did, yes.
And what are those?
In my expert opinion, after all of the articles that I reviewed, there is absolutely no link between exposure to Drufo and developing cancer of any kind, as Lush Fertilizer literally designed its products for this sort of thing not to happen.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
Examination.
Good evening. You are Skylar Weirs.
Yes, I am.
You're the twin sister of Dakota Weirs.
Yes, I am.
Yet you are opposing her in this lawsuit against Lush Fertilizer.
Unfortunately, I mean, of course I love my twin. We've been together since the womb, but I just can't stick up for what Dakota's doing today.
All right, let's switch a little bit more into your own research and your own opinions. You know that Drufo and Lush Fertilizer are safe from your own research.
Yes, and this research was based upon the references from research articles by many agri-tech companies, as well as the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
So your own research is credible.
Absolutely it is. I wouldn't say the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture would ever release not credible publications.
Even though you don't have a college degree to support these claims or your research.
You don't need to have a college degree to be able to trust the United States Department of Agriculture or the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
You believe Lush Fertilizer has a target on its back.
Absolutely, I do. I mean, we're in a trial. They do.
You believe billions of dollars are being spent to take down Lush Fertilizer and Drufo.
Absolutely, I do. This is just one mass pseudoscientific hit job, and they have the target on their back. And I think that is incredibly unfortunate because Lush has an absolutely revolutionary product that is so good for the environment and good for people as well.
So do you claim there are no risks from modern agricultural products?
Of course not. I would never claim that. Pesticides are by definition poison. They're supposed to kill the targeted organisms. However, Lush has taken this knowledge and designed a product so that their products are a whole lot safer than the other fertilizers.
You'd admit that the research on whether Drufo causes cancer is inconclusive at best.
Absolutely, I do.
Right? You're testifying for Lush Fertilizer, basically.
I'm testifying to tell the truth, which is why I'm here and it's why I'm on this side.
That's very sweet, but you are testifying for Lush Fertilizer and being paid, correct?
I'm not exactly being employed by them. I'm not testifying for them. I'm almost positive that's why Blake Doncourt was on this witness stand. I'm testifying to talk about what I found, what I researched.
Well, there is speculation that you are doing this for the money, so it is implied you are being paid.
Speculation on to my job has absolutely nothing to do with why I'm actually here. And I can tell you, I'm actually here to tell the truth and to make sure that this company isn't villainized for doing something that is honestly remarkable.
Admirable.
The speculation that I'm doing the opposite is showing the facts of other witnesses.
All right. Let's switch now into more of your personal life. Are you and Dakota close?
I wouldn't exactly say we're the closest twins, but we have our moments, maybe.
Your family was upset about you forgoing college.
I mean, of course, it's the whole American dream. It just wasn't really in the cards for me.
Your writing generates income?
It does. That's why I kind of chose not to go to college. The magazine I worked for gave me some more jobs, and my work now generates some income.
It's lucrative income?
I would not entirely. I do work part-time at Applebee's, but yes.
You're freelance?
Yes, I am.
You have a bit of a gambling problem, correct?
Oh gosh. Well, listen, I have a bit of a sports gambling problem, but I mean, that has absolutely nothing to do with anything in trial today.
But you've been having money troubles because of this gambling problem, correct?
Well, listen, I mean, a couple of years ago, who would have expected Oral Roberts to go as far as they did in March Madness? So of course I got into a bit of a hole, but again, that has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Your parents were helping you out with money?
At the time they were, and I'm thankful for that.
Well, the money stopped when your mom died.
Gosh, yeah, she did, which makes sense. I mean, she was just an amazing woman, and I miss her a lot. And yeah, a lot of things were really hard after my mom died.
Your dad has cut you off.
Well, obviously, he has other things to pay for, such as my twins' medical bills. So you could say that was cut off.
You and Dakota are the only beneficiaries of the will, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Your dad agreed to shoulder the cost of Dakota's medical bills if this lawsuit isn't successful.
Yes, which is honestly very heroic of him, and I admire him a lot.
But you're doing the right thing, right?
Of course I am.
By trying to get your sister to lose a lawsuit.
I'm doing the right thing by clearing the reputation. My twin going against Lush Fertilizer is some of her own business, and she chose this company, and that was her mistake to make. I will support her in everything she does except for this.
But you are trying to get your twin to lose a lawsuit that would cause your dad, who has cut you off, to pay for her medical bills.
I don't gain from this either way. My twin sister still has cancer. That is devastating for our family. I'm not trying to get her to lose a lawsuit either. I'm here just to tell the truth. And the trial will go however it will.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, as Ms. Weiss asked, you are a beneficiary of your dad's will.
Yes, I am.
And if Mr. Weirs loses this lawsuit, your father will continue paying for Mr. Weirs' medical bills.
Yes, he will.
What does this mean for the money that's left over in the will? Is it greater or lesser?
It's almost exactly the same, but we would still get our allotted amounts.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
And may this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would the defense like to call any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
Okay.
Good evening, Dr. Williams. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good evening. My name is Devin Williams. That's spelled Williams.
Now, Dr. Williams, let's begin with your professional education. Please describe your education.
Of course. Let's go back to when I obtained my Bachelor's of Science in Toxicology at Colorado State University. After this, I obtained my master's degree in Forensic Toxicology, again at CSU. I later went on to earn my PhD in toxicology, again at CSU.
Do you have any postdoctoral education?
I attended a post-PhD program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah.
Tell us a little bit about your professional experience.
Well, after I got my Bachelor's of Science, I worked at Larimer County office with the Chief Medical Examiner Toxicologist. After obtaining my PhD, I worked as an assistant professor at Denver CU Anschutz Medical Campus Graduate School, where I taught toxicology and pathophysiology with the division of pharmacology and medicinal chemistry. At the same time, I worked as an associate visiting professor at CSU School of Pharmacy.
From your education and your experience, are there any particular skills that you have gained?
From years of being in this field of toxicology, I'm able to identify toxic chemicals and the effects of those chemicals using biomolecular and biochemical markers.
How have you applied these skills further in your career?
Well, I teach 3 courses all revolving around toxicology at the University of New Mexico School or College of Pharmacy.
And what is your current occupation?
Currently, I lead the labs at Lush, the toxicology labs and research labs. I'm also the outgoing chair of the ethics committee.
How long have you been in research and development?
I started my career with Lush roughly a decade ago, about 12 years now.
How long have you been on the toxicology side of that?
I've led the labs for 7 years now.
Are there any particular skills that you use daily in your work?
Statistics are an integral tool for a toxicologist to use on a day-to-day basis. Personally, I use statistics every day in my line of work to come to accurate conclusions about the data.
Do you hold any certifications in your field?
I have several certifications, all revolving around toxicology in 4 states: Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah.
Have you authored any publications?
I've authored 6 publications, 3 of which have been submitted and published. 1 was submitted and awaiting publication, and the other 2 are being written.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense requests that the court recognize Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in the field of pharmacotoxicology with a specialization in environmental and occupational chemicals with a knowledge and use in statistics, as his testimony will assist the jury in determining the fact and issue.
Any objection or voir dire?
Your Honor, after a brief voir dire. Dr. Williams, you have gained a practicum certificate from the University of Utah in pharmacotoxicology.
That's correct.
And you currently teach 4 courses.
Yes, I teach 3 courses at the University of New Mexico. Which school are you referring to?
I am referring to the University of New Mexico. It says on your curriculum vitae that you teach forensic toxicology 1 and 2, principles of forensic toxicology, toxicology of environmental and occupational chemicals, which would be 4 courses. Is forensic toxicology 1 and 2 a compound course? It's listed here as 2 different courses.
It's forensic toxicology 1 and 2, meaning it's both of those classes. 1 is in 1 semester, in the second semester, I would teach forensic toxicology 2.
Okay. And you also had experiences at 3 other locations. You worked at the Larimer County Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. You worked at CU Anschutz, and you also worked at Colorado State University. Is this correct?
That's correct. I still work there, or not at Denver CU Anschutz Medical Campus. I do still teach at CSU. Yes.
Perfect, thank you. And you have certifications in 4 states?
That's correct, yes.
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Williams will be tendered as an expert. I believe it was in pharmacotoxicology, environmental and forensic toxicology. And if counsel could just clarify the other ones.
It's specialization in environmental and occupational chemicals with a knowledge and use in statistics.
Thank you, counsel. Your witness will be tendered as an expert.
Now, Dr. Williams, we've heard a lot about DRUFO. What is DRUFO?
DRUFO is a chemical constituent bonding agent in lush fertilizer.
What was your role in the development of DRUFO?
I led the labs that developed DRUFO.
Could you explain what makes lush different from other forms of fertilizers?
Well, lush contains DRUFO, which is revolutionary for the environment and for people in general.
Is lush containing DRUFO sold worldwide?
Lush is sold worldwide, however, lush containing DRUFO is not.
What is your understanding as to why this is?
Well, specifically in the European Union, under the EU's nitrate directive, more than an incidental accumulation of nitrate cannot be sold within those borders.
So how does DRUFO fit under this nitrate directive?
DRUFO contains nitrogen, but not nitrate. However, under lab tests, this can change.
So what is your understanding as to why the EU finally made the decision to not let lush containing DRUFO to be sold?
Well, the EU runs these lab tests, and they take DRUFO, put it in a petri dish, and add all kinds of bacteria that you would never find in the environment to try to get it to produce nitrate.
Are you aware of any other reasons?
No, this ban is not concerned over any cancer risks.
Let's talk a little bit about Dr. Rogers. Have you read Dr. Rogers' study in this case?
Yes, I have.
And have you fully reviewed the conclusions that are made within this study?
Yes.
In your expert opinion, would you say that this study was a valid one?
No.
Why is that?
It's a case of confirmation bias. Dr. Rogers' careers only focus on finding the dangers of these toxic chemicals. And there's not a problem with his career. The problem is that his conclusions always lead back to his preconceived notions, meaning that he's going to shape his conclusions to what he wants to believe. And that's confirmation bias.
Would you explain what a valid study in your field would look like?
Specifically in today's case, a valid study would look like comparing farm laborers who work with fertilizers containing DRUFO to farm laborers who work with fertilizers not containing DRUFO.
How is this different from Dr. Rogers' study?
Dr. Rogers compared farm laborers who work with fertilizers containing DRUFO to ordinary people who don't work at farms at all.
Going back to this case in particular, does DRUFO cause cancer?
Can't answer if DRUFO causes cancer because anything can cause cancer. I mean, even eating too much tuna can cause cancer.
Are there any particular tools that you use to reach this conclusion?
I rely on my statistics and I'm confident in my statistics and creating my expert opinion.
So what do the statistics in the evaluation of this case show?
DRUFO is not correlated to a statistically significant increase in the incidence of non-Hodgkin lymphoma cases or any other cancer cases. In addition, you have to take into account the random elements.
What is this random element?
Well, in some control groups, there's a randomly higher amount of cancer than other groups, and that's just because people can get cancer randomly. You have to incorporate that factor.
How does this directly relate back to DRUFO?
Well, on top of the statistical unlikeliness of DRUFO causing the Dakota Weir's cancer, you have to take into account that random element of Dakota Weir's possibly getting cancer randomly to come to an accurate conclusion.
Could you give an example to help the jury best understand this random element?
Of course, it's like flipping a coin. No matter how many times you flip it, you always land on a heads or a tails. If you flip it 1,000 times, you will never get 500 heads and 500 tails. That's because of that random element. You need to take into account that random element so you can come to an accurate conclusion about the data.
Finally, Dr. Williams, can you, to a reasonable degree of scientific probability, determine that DRUFO is in fact what caused Mr. Weir's cancer?
Objection leading.
Response, Your Honor?
Sure.
The question was not implying an answer, as Mr. Williams has the ability to answer to many different degrees and give his own unique answer.
Response, Your Honor?
Sure.
This does, however, call for a yes or no answer, which makes the question leading.
I am going to allow counsel to rephrase her question.
Dr. Williams, in your expert opinion, is DRUFO the sole cause of Mr. Weir's cancer?
Objection leading.
Response, Your Honor?
Sure.
This question does not imply a yes or no answer, as Dr. Williams has the ability to answer however he pleases.
Response, Your Honor?
Sure.
Just like the last question that was sustained to be leading, this also calls for a yes or no answer, making the question leading. By starting your question with the word is, you are implying that it needs a yes or no answer.
I do tend to agree, and I will allow counsel to rephrase.
In your expert opinion, what do you believe the cause of Dakota Weir's cancer?
It's impossible to know what could have caused Dakota Weir's cancer in the environment. However, it's far too statistically unlikely for DRUFO to have caused Dakota Weir's cancer in today's case.
Your Honor, no further questions at this time.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, You are employed by Lush Fertilizer, correct?
That is one of my jobs, yes.
And you've worked there for 10 years.
About 12 years now.
You lead the toxicology research and development labs,
Yes,
and you've led the toxicology labs for 7 years.
that's correct.
And Lush contains Drufo.
It does, yes.
And Drufo is banned in the EU.
As I said, I'm direct, yes.
Furthermore, you are conducting tests to submit to the EU for reconsideration.
We couldn't do these tests early on in our career as Lush had just began and still on the come up. So yeah, we're deciding to take on that journey now. Yes.
So that's it. If this court were to rule against Lush Fertilizers, this would create, in your words, a whole host of new bureaucratic roadblocks with the EU.
It would, yes.
So you're financially incentivized to testify that Drufo doesn't harm anyone.
Not necessarily, no. Not at all.
Well, if this court were to rule against Lush, this would hurt your business.
Look, as I mentioned earlier, I have several jobs. Lush is just one of my jobs. And I'm here to tell the truth about Drufo and its effects on cancer, which is none. So I have no incentive, financial incentive to rule.
Well, in your statement in line 118, you admitted to financial incentive to testify that Drufo does not harm anyone.
I admitted that Dr. Rogers has a financial bias, or greater financial bias than I do.
Well, you also admitted that you have financial bias yourself.
Somewhat. Like I said, I'm not going to use my finances as a reason to tell the truth in today's case. I'm telling the sole truth.
Okay, moving on. You are the chair of Lush Fertilizer's Ethics Committee.
The outgoing, yes.
The outgoing chair, yes. Lush's CEO, Blake Doncourt, has given you certain objectives.
What do you mean?
Well, in your statement, you said that in speaking with Lush's CEO, Blake Doncourt, he gave you certain objectives for Lush's products.
Yes, specifically within Lush's products to increase the safety every day. Yes.
To keep them cost-effective and industry-leading.
Yes.
And your company is currently conducting a study.
That's correct.
A study you expect will prove that Drufo-based products lead to reduced eutrophication in real-world applications.
Like I said on Vladimir, yes, we are conducting this.
But the study has not been completed yet.
No, not yet.
But you have positive expectations.
We do, yes.
So you lack cold, hard facts and data.
No, we do not lack cold, hard facts and data at all.
The study has not been completed yet.
Just because the study has not been completed does not mean there are facts we have found in the study. We have still found data and facts in the study. That's what the study is for.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, why is Lush not sold in the European Union?
Lush is not sold in the European Union because under lab tests, it produces nitrate. However, the bacteria that they use in these lab tests, again, would never be found in real world environments.
Are you aware of any other reasons for this ban?
No, like I said, this ban is not concerned over any cancer risks or any other risks at all.
And finally, Dr. Williams, does the study not being completed have any effect on its validity?
No, not at all. Studies take time.
Objection leading.
Response, Your Honor, this does not.
I'm going to go ahead and overrule the objection.
Finally, Dr. Williams, does this study not being complete have any effect on its validity?
No, not at all. Studies take time, and that does not mean if the study is not complete, that does not mean it does not hold facts and data in it.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Does the defense have any other witnesses they'd like to call?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Are the parties prepared to proceed to closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor.
I do believe that the plaintiffs do have a option to reserve a rebuttal closing.
Yes, Your Honor. May I reserve any of my remaining time for rebuttal?
Absolutely, and you may proceed with your closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Before we proceed, can I, according to the rules of competition, one attorney can't do both the opening and the closing, I believe.
I will need to double check that.
It's 2.3, I believe, in the rules.
Thank you. Just give me one moment if I can just have a moment to read the rules and make a decision.
Okay.
And again, counsel, I apologize. What rule were you citing?
2.3 within the rules of competition.
I apologize. It's just taking me one moment to. So I do see that in the rule, it does state, in addition, one attorney shall present the opening statement and another attorney will present the closing argument.
One moment, Your Honor. May I have a moment to confer with co-counsel?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one attorney.
Your Honor, could you read the rule again?
Sure. And just I'm looking at the entire case problem on page 15. It's rule 2.3, team responsibilities. In addition, I'm reading about third paragraph down. It says, in addition, one attorney shall present the opening statement and another attorney will present the closing argument. I will just inquire as to whether the plaintiff's side has all of the required amount of team members as necessary given the amount of witnesses and attorneys. Are you short a person?
One of our team members did have to leave earlier, but we have, I believe, what is the required amount? I believe we have the required amount. Does the rule say anything about the one attorney shall present the opening and the another shall present the closing? Does it say anything about them not being the same attorney?
It does not. I believe that the defense is interpreting this to mean that one meaning one person and another meaning another person. I i.e. two separate people. Understanding my role as the presiding judge here, I am going to allow the plaintiffs to make their closing argument as they had prepared them. I believe that any sort of issues or appeals regarding this decision can be taken up according to the competition rules. At this point, though, I am going to let the parties proceed as they had planned, and the plaintiffs can go ahead with their initial closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And I'm sorry, Judge Jens, I don't mean to interrupt you. Is this regarding whether or not the same attorney can make both an opening and a closing, ma'am?
It is, Judge.
All right, I'm looking at Rule 9.22.
And again, I'm, not as well versed clearly in the rules as the participants are.
Here, I think that your decision is correct. I think the team has the ability to make the decision about who follows what role. And if that was your decision, Judge, I'm okay under the rules with that. If the team and its coach wish to make some sort of complaint under the rules, as you noted to them, they can. But I believe that to be correct. So I will support your decision. If the team wishes to make a contest, they may.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Of course.
May I proceed with my closing argument?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Again, my name is Faith Windmigler, and I am the prosecutor in this case. The prosecution called 3 witnesses to testify as to the defendant's guilt. Each witness testified, establishing the following beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Dakota Weir's life has been significantly damaged by his development of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He can no longer be a part of National Honor Society or play the piano, meaning he lost his grandfather twice. He was simply following the status quo, not taking extremely risky actions. Or so he thought, because due to the inactions of Lush Fertilizer in labeling the product as potentially cancer-causing, everyone at Haven Landscaping felt no need to wear protective gear. If Lush had taken the time just to warn consumers of the, even if insignificant, still present cancerous risk in Drufo, people would have taken preventative measures, and Mr. Weirs would not be in the current awful situation he now is. A label on the package could have stopped the non-Hodgkin, could have showed him the true severity of what not wearing protective gear could do. Other fertilizers had warnings, but Lush's did not. Mr. Carson Durst has said the data found through Lush's studies was shaped, analyzed, and worded in a way that would receive the conclusion that was found. Exactly as Dr. Devin Williams said, when someone finds what they set out to, always question their results. Carson Durst can corroborate that Don Court did just that. Dr. Casey Rogers has testified, based on scientific evidence, that Drufo is dangerous and has potentially carcinogenic impacts. We would ask you to reject the defense theories of the case. In her opening, the defense's own lawyer stated that corporations will do anything for profit. She argued that Lush is different from other companies. But it's not. Don Court was driven to release Drufo to the market relatively quickly. Skylar Weirs conducted studies on agriculture with no expertise and no college education. Plus, even if we do not diminish her credibility based on her background or education, she has clear bias for being here today, clear incentive for testifying the way she did. And although the defense would argue that profit had no part in releasing Drufo quickly, they did not have defensible evidence to prove this. Dr. Williams only expects his study to show that Drufo is safe. It has not yet. He may have found facts, but he has not found conclusions. It is an important principle that people in our society be held accountable for their actions and their inactions. Lush failed to include a warning label of possible carcinogenic impacts. They failed their consumers. Negligence negates safety and profit was put over people. In conclusion, we would ask that you find the defendant guilty as charged. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. And from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Not all heroes wear capes. When Blake Doncourt was younger, he wanted to be a superhero. Eventually, he accepted that he'd never be as fast as the Flash or as strong as Superman. But he did find his own superpower, a fertilizer, created to be safer for the environment and safer for people everywhere. That very fertilizer that is so revolutionary is being labeled a killer. Good evening, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Ashlyn Bierrick, and along with Heidi Haverkamp and Kira Graham, we had the privilege of representing Lush Fertilizer in today's trial. Now, both sides carried burdens, but let's talk about what the plaintiff failed to prove. The first element in contention, that Lush Fertilizer failed to prevent their product from creating an unreasonable risk of harm. Let me be clear. The notion that Lush's product is dangerous is absurd. The company didn't need to bake their fertilizer in order to eliminate an unreasonable risk of harm because there was no real harm to begin with. The risks that did come along with handling it, eye irritation, skin rashes, typical. And by law, the company wasn't even required to put a recommendation on their label, but they still went above and beyond in order to ensure the safety of their consumers. The second element in contention is that Dakota Weirs had damages that were caused by Lush Fertilizer's negligence while the product was being used in a way the company expected. Dakota Weirs admitted he chose not to follow the orders of his boss. He chose not to heed the warnings. What has happened to Dakota is a tragedy, and no one is asking you to deny that. But Lush Fertilizer was not the cause. They have failed to prove these two elements by a preponderance of the evidence. Now let's talk about what we proved today. 1, that Dakota Weirs did not act as a reasonable person should or would. And 2, that he was the cause of his own damages. At the beginning of this trial, Ms. Graham asked you to remember 3 questions. First, would we be here if Dakota Weirs had just worn protective gear? We don't know. Dakota Weirs saw a single news story and suddenly every single carcinogen in his life disappeared. We'll never know if it was caused by the dozens of fertilizers he handled or if it was caused by the very chemicals he used to clean his beloved piano, because he chose his villain from the start. The second question, what do competitors have to gain from this lawsuit? The answer, everything. Lush Fertilizer had cornered the market, and every step of the way, their competitors have tried to take them down. The final question, where is the definitive link between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Lush Fertilizer? The answer, there is none. At every blatant attempt to forge a connection between the two, the claims and the studies are riddled with flaws. Not all heroes wear capes. This is the last time that I get to speak to you today. But Miss Windbilger is going to come back up here and she is going to try and wash away everything we just talked about. Don't let her. Instead, ask her this question and make her answer it. What happened to every other carcinogen in Dakota Weir's life? Find Lush Fertilizer not liable. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. And if I could just get a time on how much time the plaintiffs have for rebuttal. Looks like 1 minute and 52 seconds. So Ms. Winbigler, you are free to make your rebuttal closing.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll keep this brief. Though the defense may argue there is no correlation between Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, there is proof beyond any reasonable doubt that there is, or that there was at least a sufficient chance of carcinogens in Drufo. The claims and the studies are not riddled with flaws. Lush fertilizers and their use of Drufo is, and their lack of ability to apply labels to a substance to protect consumers, to show them the severity and the importance of wearing protective gear. Profit was put over people, and their negligence negated the safety of consumers, such as Mr. Dakota Weir's. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. I do believe that concludes our trial. You guys should all give yourselves a round of applause. All of you did a really excellent job. Yes. And I'm not sure if our scoring panelists have already completed their scoring forms or anything. If we need to give them some time to do that, I'm happy to. I do have some feedback for all the parties, just to give the scoring panelists some time to finalize their thoughts and feedback, if that works.
Sorry, Judge Enns, I missed you. You're welcome to give your comments as the panelists score.
Great. So I'll just go through how the trial went with opening statements. On the plaintiff side, I really liked your theme, prioritize profit over people, and negligence over safety. Money's more important. I thought that your road mapping for how the trial was going to go was really good. And just in terms of your presentation itself, you had really good tone, really good pace. I think a lot of people, when they start public speaking, they go a lot faster than I think they realize in their head. And you did a really good job of being very clear and thoughtful, and that was very persuasive. In terms of the defense opening, I believe that was Kira Graham. I also like your guys' theory that not all heroes wear capes. I think that goes really well with the facts of this particular problem. And I thought that your organization of your opening was very compelling. You sort of go in, you start with going really hard on this like environmentalist, anti-corporation argument, and sort of, making your party the actual victim in this. And I think the way that you followed up with the road mapping of how your case in chief was going to go was really persuasive. In terms of Dakota Weir's testimony, in terms of the witness, I think that you did a very good job. I believe that was Adam. You did a good job as a witness. I would encourage you to go off paper and sort of, obviously not over extrapolate, but just you can add, your own sort of flair to it. But otherwise you had a really good grip on the facts, and you did a good job, particularly with being compelling with the whole like piano and losing my grandfather twice. That was good. In terms of the direct examination, that was Owen. I did like I have written in my notes, what opportunities have come from you playing the piano? I just thought that was a really good question. It was really well phrased, and I liked it. For cross-examination, there was, I believe that was Ashlyn. So there was for the first part of it, you sort of just let this witness like go on with this narrative. And I kept thinking like, come on, object. And then you did, and I wrote in my notes like, good. So that was good. That's a really like good spotting of that objection. You could probably have done that like 2 minutes earlier. Your signposting on cross was really good. And your witness control, I thought, was very good. The hand up thing is a really like helpful move. And the only advice that I would have in terms of witness control, because he did get pretty squirrely on you, and you also did this like eventually, is instead of talking over the witness, you let him just go on and on and on and on. And then you just bring it back to like, okay, so that's a yes, or that's a no. And you did that. Just be more confident in doing that more often, because the more you do it, the more the jury's going to see that this witness is just going off on you and like you're in control of the situation. Blake Duncourt, in terms of the witness, I think that your performance was more like candid and realistic. And I really liked that. I thought you had a very good presence and you testified really confidently. And I realize my notes are now going out of order. So the direct examination, I really liked that last chapter about why this witness is so passionately against introducing anything that could be potentially harmful. I think that's a really good front end, call it like running to the bummer of like, you anticipate what the cross-examination is going to be. If you front end it, that builds your credibility and sort of decreases the opposing counsel's credibility when they're crossing on something that you already just explained away. In terms of the cross-examination, your objection, Owen, on the relevance and of this testimony about the philanthropy of the company, really good objection. In the future, I would try a bolstering objection over a relevance objection. Basically, bolstering is like unnecessarily, building this witness's credibility when it's not been actually put in issue yet. Talking about your philanthropy is like, it is irrelevant and it's also bolstering it. So it's can actually be prejudicial to your case. But that was a good eye and good objection on that. I'm going to move through two because I don't want to take up too much time. There was one witness, and I think it was, apologize. Sorry. It was, I remember it was Ashlyn Vierick, is that how you say it? It was your witness and you did a redirect on whether or not, geez, I'm sorry, I've lost my notes. My overall opinion on that witness and that redirect was that that may have been one of the better redirects I've seen, not just in mock trial, but in my career. You stayed away from leading questions. You put out the fires that crossed it, and it was extremely effective. Obviously, I have lost my notes, and I'm sorry that I can't say which witness specifically, but you know which one I'm talking about. Redirect in general, you guys did a really good job, all of you, of putting out the fires. Be careful of asking leading questions. I know it's like really easy to find yourself in that position. But I will say that Kira did a really good job on her redirect of developing the point that she was trying to make on redirect through her questioning. That's great. That's how you, that's the like luring part of asking questions and examining witnesses, is you get them with your questions. So I thought that that was a really persuasive way to get the information that you wanted. In terms of the closing arguments and rebuttal close, for the plaintiff side, I liked how you reincorporated your theme and theory. I will just say, I mean, I understand this beyond reasonable doubt is for criminal cases, and this is a civil case. So just for the next round, like, you know, make sure you're right on the standards and the burdens of proof and stuff. But otherwise, you know, you did a really good job of using the defense's expert testimony against them with the confirmation bias thing. That was really good. And I could tell that you were incorporating stuff that had happened actually during the trial, which is just shows that you're listening, and it's not super pre-prepared, and like that is how you make a persuasive closing argument. And then in terms of the defense, again, I liked your reincorporation of your theme and theory, and you're moving with purpose. The 1, 2, 3 thing is excellent. I think that and your overall presence, like you're a very good public speaker, and you are confident, and you have a lot of skills, and that really came through in closing argument. So I think you did a really good job. And overall, I think all of you guys did an awesome job. I have to say, you know, I'm in court a lot, and I deal with a lot of attorneys, and you definitely could go toe to toe with some of the people I practice with. So good job, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure if anybody else has comments. I know I just took up a whole bunch of time.
No, that's actually fine. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, I would like to echo Judge Yen's comments that you guys did a really good job. I'm an attorney that mainly does civil. So yes, I know she caught that there at the end. I would just suggest, instead of finding the defendant guilty as plaintiff, you're actually asking, hey, find in favor of my client, because I want you to give me money. And that's the whole thing there. But I got where you were going. One thing that was really impressive to me was how prepared all the witnesses were. I mean, that was just amazing. I mean, there wasn't anybody that was just completely reading a statement, which is what I've seen in the past. So I mean, kudos to all of you for working so hard to do that. It makes it a lot more fun being on this side and watching. So that was a real treat. I did like the themes, just like the judge said. I thought the directs had some good open-ended questions. There was a really good section of cat and mouse between Ms. Wise, Ms. Graham, and Ms. Katsky. I thought the Ms. Wise did a really good section with guideposts. Actually, Ms. Graham did really good guideposts too. Ms. Graham did a good job as far as keeping Exhibit 3 out, because I know that's a point of contention because it is hearsay. And Ms. Katsky did a really good job of just kind of rolling with the punches. It's like, oh, wait, that's not going to work, so I'm going to go over here and give my testimony. So I thought you three it was fun to watch because it was like, oh, where are we going to get? Okay, oh, nope, that's not coming in. Okay, we're going over here. All right, oh, that is coming in. So that was kind of fun to watch. So good job. Mr. Sun, you know your stuff as a witness. Just slow down a bit because you know it and you just feel confident in it because you got it. Just let the rest of us know. So let's see. I don't know if Mr. Clayman is still here. I don't know if he was the one that had to leave. Okay.
He did have to leave, but we're taking down his comments to tell him.
Okay. As far as his cross, I thought he hit some really important points and actually got the main points. What I would have liked to have seen a little bit better is a change in the reorg. I just reorg as far as how he went after it. Because you've got your theme of profit over people. And he waited until almost the end of his cross to start doing the comments on the profit. So if he could start with something like, Mr. Doncourt, your firm is for profit, correct? And profit making is important to you, correct? So you're concerned about anything that impacts your profit, correct? And then he can go on to all of the different areas that he was hitting where it impacted the profit. So, and I think that would be a better setup and it would be easier to follow instead of just starting in with the divorce, because not only with the divorce, but also the gambling, I think both of those areas could be knocked out based on relevance to start with. It doesn't really add much, except for just kind of, ooh, it's a gotcha for the witness. As far as the gambling, and this is for both teams, because I know both sides going to switch back and forth in dealing with it. And I think from what I saw today, I think you're both ready for this. There are rules of evidence of 403 and 608. 403 is more prejudicial than probative. Pretty much you're saying is that, who cares if this witness is gambling? It's more prejudicial against the witness than it is really going to add anything to this case. So you can use that argument. And the second part of it is, yes, if there is something that a witness has done that is untruthful, such as they've committed fraud, they're misrepresenting something, they're committed theft, that stuff can come in because it can show that maybe this witness is going to lie to you. Whereas gambling, well, I think we've all probably put something in the office pool at least. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. So in your next rounds, I would encourage you to maybe throw that out, see if you can keep the gambling out and keep the divorce out too. Let's see. Also, with all the crosses, it was evident that everyone used the witness statements as a roadmap to write your cross questions. And that's great. Good job. But let's see, I think I've got everything. Again, you guys did great. I was very, very impressed. Yeah, after I've done this for several years, and I would have to say that this group was one of the better ones that I've seen. So. Good job. And thank you.
I'm one of your juror scores, Holly Ryan. I'm a public trustee, I'm actually still a lawyer, but not practicing since I'm a public trustee. I've been doing this for many years, and I've got to say that both of these teams were excellent. I agree, the witnesses had their information down. Jordan Merriweather, wow, what a job with all of the scientific and knowing all of that information. That's really difficult information to have to try to keep in your head and keep straight, especially when you're switching between prosecution and defense on different rounds to keep all that straight. For the prosecution, I would have liked on direct. I know you got a little confused when they were objecting to the Exhibit 1. And instead of continuing with laying the foundation without publishing it, you didn't get Exhibit 1 into evidence. And I think that's a really good exhibit for you guys, because that lays the whole groundwork for, well, you didn't wear your PPE. It clearly says on that label that you're supposed to be covered and what all that is. So don't let the defense confuse you when it comes to objections on trying to get your foundation in. Just go through, ask your questions to the witness and get that in so that you can move forward. Good job trying to keep the witnesses reined in, especially on cross. I know the witnesses were wanting to, show their knowledge, and they were doing a good job on cross, but very good job reining them in and using the yes/no questions. I did like prosecution's use of all of the elements, and this is what they have to prove, and this is what we have to prove, and then at closing coming back going, this is what they had to prove and they didn't do it because, and here's what we had to prove and we did because. That helps bring everything back in with the testimony. And I agree with the judge that, the prosecution did a really good job, or plaintiff did a good job in their rebuttal to say, well, but wait a minute, we did this. So very good storytelling, very good job. You should be very proud of yourself. It was very enjoyable to watch.
All right, did all of our scoring panelists get a chance to give the kids comments, or are we still missing Mr. Gillespie?
Still missing Mr. Gillespie, but I'll be brief. I know.
No, take time, sir.
I understand the teams probably want to get to their debriefs and stuff and share the comments. Katie, Serena, Holly, super thorough with their critiques. So I'll just touch on two minor things that might help. A background on me: I'm just a detective. I'm just an investigator. I'm a poser. I snuck in here. I don't know, maybe they didn't check the application correctly, didn't realize I was actually a lawyer.
Oh, come on. You're not just an investigator. Come on.
Two things. Number one, when it's public speaking and you have developed a strategy to present your point and you're asking these questions, and either counsel or plaintiff interrupts your train of thought with an objection that is sustained, and now you have to call an audible, think about how you're going to still make the same point by redirecting your path to wherever you want to go. Remember that the judge is listening and the jury is listening, and especially the jury, they might have their own particular little biases, and maybe they may take little comments you make that are completely innocent in a completely crazy way. So when somebody has sustained your ruling, don't try to internalize and keep any comments to yourself. Don't be like, okay, because I know that you're simply trying to recalibrate your thinking and stuff, but just be careful. That might make the judge mad. That might swing some jury members, especially, I guess, in a civil hearing where you're trying to sway them to your side of business. They might take it like, well, what does she mean by that? Or what did he mean by that? Something like that. Also, touching on, I believe Serena was making the comment about personal stuff. Just remember that I understand what Owen was trying to do with saying, hey, are you divorced? Stuff like that. Again, jury members, there might be a couple people on there that are divorced, and they might take offense at what you're saying. They might think that instead of just simply trying to prove your case, you're personally attacking the person on the stand. And that may piss off some jury members, and it might make them less liable to believe you. Is that right? Is that wrong? I don't know, but it's how the jury members can sometimes think because we're all humans. So I would very carefully phrase any questions that could be construed as a personal attack on the witness. Remember, you're just trying to make your point. You're not trying to make that witness up there look like a bad person. So those are basically my two things. Katie, Serena, Holly, they all touched on everything else that I was going to bring up, which is awesome. And you guys did a really great job. This is my first time scoring this thing. I don't know if you guys set the bar way up here and now all the other teams are going to be below it. I don't know. But very enjoyable, very nice hearing you guys break down this super complex brief about petrochemical nonsense and C2NO R5, whatever chemical nonsense that was. Really, really great job. Super, super difficult to score you guys because there has to be a winner out of this. But both you guys did such a great job. So round of applause off to you. Really. Thanks.
All right, I want to thank all of our scoring panelists as well as Judge Jens for volunteering their time on a late Friday. I want to thank all of you from the bar for your patience with us. Electronic mock trial has been a challenge that we are working on rising to, so I do appreciate all your efforts and your volunteerism. As for all the kids, you've heard some really, really great comments from these judges and the scoring panelists. It sounds like you did a fantastic job, so take that home as your second round tonight. Come back refreshed tomorrow. I want to again thank everybody for their participation and our scoring panelists and our judge for her patience with us. So thank you all so much. Unless there's anything else you need from me, you can all log off and maybe get on with a cup of tea and an early nap or an early to bed.
Thanks and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys.